By 1942, the war in Europe had stopped being a clash of ideals and had become a cold exercise in mathematics, where survival depended on fuel consumption, production rates, pilot fatigue, and the unforgiving logic of probability. Air power had emerged as the decisive factor in modern warfare, shaping everything from naval operations to ground offensives, and every major power understood that control of the skies meant control of the war itself. Britain had survived the Battle of Britain, but survival was not dominance, and the Luftwaffe had rebuilt its strength behind a formidable defensive system of radar stations, searchlights, flak belts, and interceptor squadrons. German airspace was no longer simply defended, it was engineered, designed to bleed attacking forces dry long before they reached their targets. The traditional response was mass: send hundreds of bombers, accept heavy losses, and hope the damage inflicted justified the cost. Yet as the months passed, it became painfully clear that this strategy was consuming trained aircrews faster than they could be replaced, turning victory into a race Britain might not win. Inside RAF planning rooms, unease grew as casualty figures climbed and mission reports painted a grim picture of diminishing returns. Heavy bombers were built around the idea of self-defense, bristling with guns and crewed by men whose sole job was to fight enemy fighters, but every turret added weight, drag, and vulnerability. Each additional crew member increased the human cost of every loss, and every extra kilogram reduced speed and range. A small group of planners and engineers began to question the assumptions that had governed bomber design since the First World War. Instead of forcing their way through enemy defenses, they asked whether it was possible to avoid those defenses altogether. The idea was radical and deeply uncomfortable, because it implied that decades of doctrine might be wrong, and that survival in modern air warfare might depend not on firepower, but on speed, efficiency, and precision. The aircraft that emerged from this thinking was designed around a single ruthless principle: eliminate everything that did not directly contribute to mission success. Defensive guns were removed, armor was minimized, and crew size was reduced to the absolute minimum. Weight savings were converted into speed and range, and reliability was prioritized over brute power. The engines were chosen not for dramatic climb performance, but for sustained high-speed cruising, allowing the aircraft to treat enemy airspace as a corridor rather than a battlefield. This was not a bomber intended to fight. It was an intruder built to arrive unannounced, strike precisely, and leave before the enemy could react. Test flights revealed that stripping away excess had unlocked unexpected performance, producing an aircraft faster, smoother, and more agile than many fighters that outweighed it by several tons. Early operational missions were deliberately understated, assigned to tasks where failure would be noticed but not catastrophic, allowing the concept to be tested under real conditions. The results were unsettling for the defenders. Radar contacts appeared briefly and vanished before interceptors could be positioned. Fighters scrambled only to find empty sky, and flak batteries fired blindly at aircraft already gone. Mission reports showed a pattern that traditional defenses were ill-equipped to handle: attacks executed with precise timing, minimal exposure, and no opportunity for pursuit. The damage inflicted was often modest in physical terms, but the psychological effect was profound, because it revealed gaps in systems that had been designed to provide certainty and control. For the first time, German air defenses were reacting rather than dictating the terms of engagement. Within the squadrons that flew the aircraft, a distinct culture developed, shaped by the nature of the missions themselves. Crews operated independently rather than as anonymous elements of massive formations, relying on careful planning, precise navigation, and disciplined execution. There was no room for bravado or improvisation once airborne. Success depended on preparation and timing rather than combat skill. Ground crews valued the aircraft for its relative simplicity and reliability, which allowed rapid maintenance and dispersed operations that were harder for enemy bombers to disrupt. Over time, the aircraft ceased to be seen as merely a machine and became a symbol of a different approach to warfare, one that rewarded intelligence and efficiency over brute force. As the war progressed, the aircraft's adaptability became increasingly apparent. Variants were developed for reconnaissance, night fighting, and precision strike roles, each exploiting the same core strengths of speed and efficiency. Reconnaissance versions penetrated deep into enemy territory, returning with intelligence that reshaped strategic planning and target selection. Night fighter variants turned the tables on enemy bombers, using radar and superior performance to hunt aircraft that had once operated with relative impunity under cover of darkness. Each new role reinforced the same lesson: a well-balanced design could outperform more specialized machines simply by refusing to accept traditional limitations. The enemy attempted to respond by copying the concept, but imitation without understanding proved ineffective. While similar shapes and configurations appeared on drawing boards, industrial disruption, inconsistent materials, and a lack of craftsmanship undermined production. The philosophy that made the original aircraft successful could not be replicated through shortcuts or superficial similarities. Instead of producing a credible counter, these efforts drained resources and exposed weaknesses in manufacturing systems already under strain. The contrast highlighted a deeper difference between the two sides. One embraced adaptation and improvisation, while the other remained bound to rigid structures and expectations. Beyond its physical impact, the aircraft exerted a corrosive influence on enemy morale and behavior. Defensive patrols increased in frequency but decreased in effectiveness, burning fuel and exhausting crews with little to show for the effort. Commanders hesitated to declare areas secure, knowing that speed and timing could defeat even the most elaborate preparations. Pilots reported frustration and fatigue, forced to chase contacts they could not intercept and confront threats they could not reliably counter. This erosion of confidence was cumulative and irreversible, weakening the effectiveness of air defenses even when no attack occurred. As victory began to come into view, analysts looking back at the air war recognized the aircraft not as a miracle weapon, but as a catalyst that accelerated change. It demonstrated that speed could be a form of protection, that precision could achieve results disproportionate to effort, and that versatility was a strategic advantage rather than a compromise. These lessons were absorbed rapidly in the post-war period, influencing the design of new aircraft that emphasized performance and survivability over defensive armament. The jet age would carry these ideas forward, embedding them in doctrines that remain relevant to this day. The influence of the aircraft extended beyond the military sphere into civilian aviation and industrial thinking. Lightweight structures, modular design, and distributed manufacturing gained new credibility as practical solutions rather than emergency measures. The idea that smaller, flexible workshops could contribute meaningfully to large-scale production reshaped post-war economies and reconstruction efforts. The aircraft became a case study in how constraint could drive innovation, proving that scarcity, when approached intelligently, could be transformed into an advantage rather than a liability. For the pilots who flew it, the aircraft offered a unique experience defined by responsibility and trust. Missions demanded precision rather than aggression, discipline rather than bravado, and success depended as much on judgment as on technical skill. This mindset spread beyond individual squadrons, influencing training and leadership across the Air Force. The aircraft became more than a tool, it became a benchmark against which effectiveness was measured, shaping how future generations of aviators understood their role in combat. In the end, the story of this aircraft was not simply about materials or performance, but about mindset. It was born from necessity, refined through experience, and validated by results that challenged long-held assumptions. Where one side relied on mass and tradition, the other invested in clarity of purpose and intelligent design. History remembers it not as an anomaly, but as a lesson in how innovation, when guided by clear objectives and disciplined execution, can overcome even the most formidable opposition.